Hi, my name is Liz Kuennen, and we're making this video to help you out with a few tips on paper piecing quilts. A lot of people, when they do paper piecing, just use the paper like this that comes in their printer. Well, there's a lot of alternatives out there that are probably a lot easier to work with than printer paper. I've used printer paper before, and it's difficult to get the paper out once you've got the pieces done. So another alternative is, it's a type of interfacing, looks like interfacing that's sold, that's used specifically for paper piecing. This I've tried, it works better as far as the softness goes, but I've also found this difficult to remove. So a few alternatives I suggest is tracing paper. This is artist tracing paper, and you can run it through your printer a lot easier if you have a top loading printer than one that loads from below. I haven't had too much trouble with it. It's a lot thinner. You can see through it when you're using your fabrics, and it's fairly inexpensive. Another alternative, which is similar to the tracing paper, is vellum. Vellum is much thicker. You can buy this at office supply stores. It runs through your printer very well, but it is thicker to work with. But the advantage of this is it tears easily. It's like a more brittle form of paper. And another option is newsprint, which you'd probably have to find this from an art supply store, or you might be able to talk to your newspaper, see if they have almost empty rolls that you could cut down to the correct size. When I do paper piecing, I want to make sure that I have pieces to start out with that are similar to the size of the piece that I want to work with. And so I don't have to use big pieces of fabric. I take my paper, an extra copy of the paper piecing, and I cut it with an approximate seam allowance. After I do that, I take the different pieces and make sure I have one piece of every pattern piece that I need. So we'll demonstrate this on the first two pieces on this pattern. And then I take the pattern and just lay it on top of my fabric and rough cut it. This way I don't have to use a big piece of fabric to do the paper piecing. And it's a lot easier when it comes time to placing your fabrics. So with paper piecing, most of the patterns are numbered. This is actually the side of the paper you will be sewing on. You'll sew on the right side of the paper, not the wrong side. As you can see in this piece, that's the right side, that's the wrong side. So when you start with your pattern, you want to turn it to the wrong side, which I have here, and place your first piece of fabric. And then take a pin and pin it down. Then turn it over, and because this is vellum, you can see, if you hold it up against the light, you can see where the fabric is. Then approximately 1/4 of an inch, line up your pieces. And pin them down. And you can remove this one so it's not in the way. Then using a smaller than normal stitch length, you want to start approximately 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the seam and then go all the way through. This will eventually be your seam line when you join the pieces together to make your pattern. So I start there. Start about 1/4 of an inch or so from the edge of your sewing line. And then go all the way through. Generally, I would do these several pieces at a time, so I don't have to have long thread tails in between. And then you will alfalfas. Trim to approximately 1/4 of an inch. And then I just use my fingernails and crease the fabric and then turn it over. If you notice, you have quite a bit of fabric on this edge right here. So to get rid of that, I fold my piece of paper approximately 1/4 of an inch and trim my fabric. It makes it easier to work with later on. So a tip for pinning pieces so that you don't shift the pieces when you adjust the pin. If you were to take a piece of fabric, or like on this piece, and I want to join the corners of the triangles to make my pattern, you put your pin through the tips of each triangle. Now, if you were to do it the conventional way, or way a lot of people do it, and the way I did when I first started quilting, you just take the pin, flip it like this, and pin through to hold it together. But the problem with that is it causes the top piece of your pattern or the fabric to shift slightly, and your corners will no longer meet. So instead of doing that, what I do is I run my pins through each corner on all three places where the triangles meet. Make sure it's lined up well. And then I take another pin, and on either side of my pins, I pin like this. That way, your patterns stay aligned, and you don't have as much trouble with the alignment of your fabric. And your corners tend to align better. And then when you get them pinned, you can remove the pins. Now, another tip I want to give you for removing the fabric when you're all done. Say this piece is all done and you're done sewing. One thing you can do is stretch the fabric and it'll rip your seams. And then you can take a tweezer and remove the fabric from the pattern so you can get every last little bit of the fabric. It's a lot easier than trying to rip it off with your fingernails. So find a tweezer you like, you're comfortable with, and use that to aid. So when you're all done, with your pieces and you get all the seams sewn together, then you can get the paper off easier. And this is the vellum, so you can see that the vellum rips easily and is easier to take out. So I hope this helps with your piecing and with your quilting, and there's a few tips that you can use. And like I always tell my students, learn the different methods and adopt the one that suits you the best. What works for one person will not always work for everybody. So enjoy.